On today's show, the Hawks lose a nail-biter at home to the San Antonio Spurs on this Wednesday into Thursday. Plus, the deadline is coming up on Thursday afternoon. A big name is now off the board. We'll get into all of that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1903 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday here in early February. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no way to make every play more exciting with FanDuel Sportsbook. If you're a new customer, bet $5, and if you win, you get $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel. Download the app right now at FanDuel or head to FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcasts. That includes, of course, Apple and Spotify, etc. Plus, we are on YouTube. Please like this video as you're watching it on that platform, and please subscribe and tell your friends about the show. We'll dive in now to what became a close-fought loss for the Hawks. I should say at the top of the show, we will have some trade deadline talk later on in the episode, but nothing actually happened for the Hawks today, so we're going to hold off until the second segment to hit on that. It's been a little bit of a programming change because there's a big name that's off the board now in Brandon Ingram, but we'll come back to that in just a few minutes. But anyway, it's the final game for the deadline for the Hawks on this Wednesday. It was a home game, 126-125 at the hands of the Spurs. De'Aaron Fox's debut with the Spurs was kind of the national angle to this game. The Hawks were 4.5-point underdogs in this one, even at home, according to our friends at FanDuel. So a game that they were not huge underdogs in, but certainly were notable underdogs in. And they were down 20 in the first half, down 18 at halftime. They played great in the third quarter, really great overall. In the second half of this game, it was tied in the final minute or so. They clawed back into it, but in the end, a late foul call that I would say was like semi-controversial, to be sure, on Okongwu that gave Wembanyama free throws to win the game. There was a challenge that was definitely controversial by Quin Snyder that I, spoiler alert, did not like and did not think it was the right decision. I asked Quinn about that after the game. He definitely kind of just relented and said, like, maybe they second guess that now. But in the end, it did not work out for Atlanta, and they lose by 1 point, as we'll chronicle in more depth later on. So, big picture, I would say it's not a game that the Hawks were awesome on offense or awesome on defense or terrible on offense or terrible on defense. They were just okay overall. They did slightly beat expectations in this game, which doesn't really matter that much, but one of those things. They did a decent job overall in the game. I know the game was kind of played in the mid 120s in terms of points, which might sort of point you to thinking the defense was bad, but it really wasn't for most of the game. It was a very fast-paced game, lots of possessions, and that kind of leads to some efficiency stuff that kind of pushes your numbers up in the counting stats realm. I would say it was below average overall for the Hawks in this game because, they lose the game by a narrow factor. But the single biggest factor in this game on the court was the turnover margin. That's kind of very simple. But the Hawks had 20 turnovers in this game, including 12 in the first half as they built that big deficit before halftime. And they those 20 turnovers led directly to 28 points for the Spurs. San Antonio, to their credit, took full advantage of those, but it's tough for your defense in particular to get stops when you commit a lot of turnovers because they're going to be running on you in fast breaks and all that stuff. And 16 of the turnovers were live ball steals. That's a very bad spot for your defense. So that's that's probably the number one area I would focus on in this game overall. On the flip side, only 10 turnovers for the Spurs. So 10 extra possessions in the turnover margin. In fact, that big split in the possession battle overall in this game, I often point to this, but the team that takes more shots than the opponent is in a good position. Doesn't mean you're going to win, but it's something that you obviously want to do. And in this game, the Hawks took 9 fewer shots overall possession-wise than the Spurs. And in a 1-point loss, that matters. The Hawks actually shot the ball better than the Spurs did in this game. And they did a pretty good job elsewhere too. But the split there on the turnover battle led to this close-fought loss. In fact, Atlanta, 33 assists, 38% from 3, 53% from the field. Like, it was all pretty good on that stuff. It was a low free throw game, and the team didn't do much on the glass, but I actually thought Trae Young made an interesting point post-game from the podium where he said kind of like how much he liked and how I think he thought the fans like this as well. The refs let them play a lot. There were not a lot of whistles in this game, especially compared to the game that I watched the other night. There was just a total whistle fest. This was not that. But also, he did say kind of slyly that it changed in the last play as the Hawks were called for a controversial foul at the end of the game. But it was also the most concentrated offensive scoring night of the season for the Hawks. What I mean by that is it was really 4 guys that had scoring punch in this game for Atlanta. The quartet of Okongwu, Young, Hunter, and Dyson Daniels had 103 of the 125 points for the Hawks. That is not usually how this team operates. Obviously, they have leading scorers, Trae, Jalen, etc. Hunter this year, but 4 guys having 100-plus points is a lot of points for 4 guys. But everybody else, not so great on offense. The bench was really bad for the Hawks this game. That's one of my broad takeaways as well. I thought Keaton Walls was actually fine, to be fair. That's a little bit separate. And I thought Don Barlow was decent in the second half in particular. But Larry Nance had a rough one. He's been struggling recently. Also, Garrison Matthews was quite bad and then got skipped in the second half, I think for good reason. And V wasn't great either. The top 4 guys that I mentioned before that had all the points were +4 or better in the plus-minus in this game. And again, they lost. Everybody else, not so good. Okongwu, by the way, was +12 in a game they lost by 1 point. So they really kind of dominated his minutes. And without him on the court, it didn't go well. And there you go. But anyway, look, the defense was not great in this game. It was legitimately good after halftime. They had a 106 defensive rating following the halftime break. They kept Wemby largely in check in this game, which they held up really well. The rough start did cost them defensively, but that'll come up more later on. Look, it's overall, like, it's not a great loss. It's never a great loss ever. But, you lose the game by 1 point. It's frustrating. It's memorable because you were right back in the game. But the Hawks did kind of scratch and claw and get back into it in a pretty impressive fashion in the second half. And obviously, you could tell that Quin, I think, post-game was certainly wrestling with this one more than some. I think because of the choice to challenge the play at the very end and how that losing that challenge kind of lost the game in some respects. And by the way, I'll talk about it more later on, but I thought it was the wrong move in the moment. I think he would now agree with that based on what he said post-game. But you also have to remember this, like the 47 and a half minutes before that all count. And if the Hawks had played better in the first half, they might have won. Or if they didn't have, by the way, weird rotation decisions in the first half that I'll come back to later on, they might have won the game as well. So, blame to go around for sure. I don't think it was Quin's best night. I don't think it was a good night for the bench really at all. The top 4 guys were really good for the most part. But anyway, nothing wrong with losing to a team like the Spurs, who are, at least in their current construction, I think a little bit better than the Hawks are without Jalen Johnson, for instance, and without Bogey and without Capella, etc. But a game that was so close to being stolen in a good way for Atlanta. So it's a little bit frustrating for sure, especially as you lead into the deadline and all that stuff. But in the end, not an embarrassing effort by any means, just not one that you would want to celebrate too much because it was right there for you and you couldn't steal it at the final seconds of the game. Okay, we'll get into more of how this game unfolded. Also, my thoughts on the deadline and where things are right now on the rumor mill, Brandon Ingram off the board, all that stuff's coming up in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Basketball season is now heating up. There's no better way to get on the action with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. They have over 10 million members and billions in award winnings, and the PrizePicks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Here's how it works. All you have to do is pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week I'm looking at the board every single day, and the best part is the PrizePicks, they keep things simple. You can set your central lamps in just a minute or less, and their fast, secure withdrawals means that you get paid quickly when you happen to win at PrizePicks. Plus, they have a Taco Tuesday promotion. They also give you this kind of player projections on even more values. And check out the promos tab to tail any of these super sweet million winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you win a split up to $1 million in promo funds. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $50 instantly if you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. That code is LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. $50 instantly at PrizePicks after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, and well, 'tis the season. I have changed the rundown a little bit because of what was breaking as I was starting to record this podcast, which is Brandon Ingram is now off the board. So this is going to be the trade segment. We'll come back to the game in a little bit. But in the meantime, the deadline is Thursday afternoon. And actually, as I'm recording this podcast now, we are post-midnight. So it's actually later today as I'm recording this. We're about 14 and a half hours away from the deadline. But the big news tonight is obviously Brandon Ingram going to Toronto by all reports. The Hawks definitely had interest in Brandon Ingram. I'll say that out loud. I reported that already on the podcast. It's been out there. I talked about it yesterday on the show. And by the way, most of what I said on the show that I dropped on Tuesday evening into Wednesday is still relevant. Please listen to that show if you've not already. I talk about Hunter. I talk about Capella, Bogdanovich, etc. Yes, the Ingram stuff's now out of date, but everything else is kind of right there for you. So there's that. But from what I can gather tonight in my Twitter mentions, Blue Sky mentions, etc., Hawks fans, at least some of them, got their hopes up on Brandon Ingram. And I get that. I understand it for sure. He's a big-name player. He's a big-name scorer. Realistically, someone who was tied to Atlanta, and I think realistically so. The Hawks called on him and talked about him multiple times with the Pelicans in the last couple of days and weeks. And he's the only guy like that that's been, like, really rumored. I mentioned earlier this week that there was a stray report about Paul George in Atlanta. And look, maybe that will happen and I'll be surprised. But that's not with the intensity that Brandon Ingram is right now on this front. Or at least has been until within the last hour, basically. But I did say on that show yesterday that Toronto is the other major bidder that was kind of out there. And they paid a price, honestly, that I don't think the Hawks should have matched. That's my broad takeaway. So they sent very similar matching salary, the Raptors did, to the Pelicans. Bruce Brown makes almost exactly what Clint Capella makes. So Bruce Brown, expiring contract, Capella, expiring contract. It's just kind of what it is. You throw that in there, make the money work. Then they put in Kelly Olynyk, who was kind of surprising, but he makes less than Bogey does. Same length of contract, makes less. So Olynyk isn't as good as Bogey, but Toronto the Pelicans just wanted to have their books as clean as possible, it seemed like, in the Ingram pursuit. But the big thing on this front is the draft compensation. That is what you're looking for as to how to evaluate this trade. What did you throw in asset-wise to make the Pelicans say yes to do this? And as I record this, the reporting so far is that Shams reported it's a first-round pick and a second-round pick going from Toronto to New Orleans. My friend Jake Fisher of the Steinline and Bleacher Report reported that the first-round pick is a 2026 pick from Indiana that was part of the Pascal Siakam deal. That pick, unless it's changed, that pick is top 4 protected. That's a very, very real pick. The Pacers are pretty good, but they're not the Celtics. Like they're a pretty good team. That's a very attractive, real first-round pick that the Raptors were able to send in this deal, plus a second round or two. And that's more of a throw-in, but this is multiple picks, including a real first. And look, I already know some fans are not going to like this. It's fine. People just like to do trades. I did a Twitter poll tonight, actually, that was kind of funny, where I literally said, okay, you have two choices. Make a trade that you don't like, or no trade at all. And like 45% of people said trade they don't like because they just like trades. It is what it is. I get it. But I know people that just want to done the trade and people like action. But this is a bigger price that I would have paid if I was the Hawks. And as the host of the podcast, as someone who analyzes the team, that's my takeaway. I would not have matched or exceeded this price if I was the Hawks. I don't know exactly where the Hawks stopped in their pursuit of Brandon Ingram. I don't know if they were willing to throw in some draft capital, maybe a second-round pick, 2 seconds. But I know one thing, just by looking at what actually got accepted, the Hawks were not offering a deal better than this, or they would have been accepted on that front. I would not have paid a first-round pick as choice as the one that the Raptors said, period. Before you get to the second-round pick, etc. That's me. That's my evaluation. I think Ingram would have been intriguing for sure, but he's on an expiring contract. That's a very relevant data point here. You might have to overpay to keep him, either because it's the market in the summer or an extension ahead of time. I don't love that. And if you give a first-round pick plus in a trade on February 5th or February 6th, and then the guy leaves in free agency for nothing in a few weeks, that is not going to go very well for you, I don't think. So it's one of those things where I don't particularly, I'm not bothered by it. I'm not bothered by the interest by the Hawks, any of that stuff. But in the end, I would have walked away like the Hawks did. Like I said, one more time, I don't know exactly where the Hawks' walkaway point was, but it was short of this, and I agree with that decision, broadly speaking. And I get it. People are going to be like, I don't care. I want to bring Ingram. That's fine. But I'm going to give you the nuanced point of view. That's kind of where I am. at this stage, and I would have walked away. If you could have got him for a song, you do it. I'm fine with that. I'm not the biggest Ingram fan in the world, but he does have a unique skill set. He can score, all those things, but I wouldn't have overpaid for him. And I think what Toronto paid was an overpay. And to get him, you have to at least match that or overpay it or exceed it. I would not have done that. So I'm okay with the Hawks not doing this. And I'm already preparing for the deluge of the Hawks aren't doing anything, whatever. I get it, but that doesn't mean you make a bad trade. That's kind of where I would be. Elsewhere, quickly here, the Hunter stuff is still out there with Cleveland. As I discussed last night, Chris Fedor reported on the same thing that I talked about last night as well. Karis LeVert seems to be the very logical matching salary in that deal if it happens. I've not heard anything imminent at all there. That's just kind of been out there. Same with Bogey and with Clint. Nothing's really new on that front. Again, listen to the show that I did yesterday. I still believe, as of 12:30 a.m. Thursday morning, that Bogey is more likely to be traded than Clint. I stand on that, but it doesn't mean it's a definite thing. My meter is higher on Bogey than it is on Clint at this moment. They could both be traded. They could neither be traded. That would be more surprising, but nothing crazy about that. But yeah, they got 15 hours or so as I record this, so it doesn't have to be tonight. People are like acting like it's like the deadline's over. We're not there yet, but still kind of status quo at the moment. Just the big thing is that Ingram's off the board. That's the major change. And by the way, as I'm recording this podcast at 12:30 in the morning, the Hornets and Lakers just agreed on a deal. I will react to this in real time with no prep. The Lakers, because the Lakers have the interest of the Hawks draft pick, they're going to get Mark Williams, it looks like, as according to my phone. This is one of those fun live reaction things. That's going to help the Lakers. I don't know how good Mark Williams is, especially defensively, because his numbers are kind of like not great defensively, but they didn't have a center, famously. That was a spot that Clint could have maybe gone to that I doubt he will go to now. And it looks like the deal is Dalton Connect, old pal Cam Reddish, and a first rounder, plus more for Mark Williams. That's a big price for Mark Williams. That's an overpay for Mark Williams, I think. But anyway, not that podcast. In the meantime, things are going to happen. So if something happens between now and when this goes up in the morning, just know that I'm going to be here later on. And as I'll say one more time later on the podcast, I will have a show on Thursday no matter what. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, back to the game quickly here. I will try to fly through my notes a little bit faster than I often would. But as a hard pivot, like the Hawks actually had an interesting plan for Victor Wembanyama on Wednesday. They actually had Hunter defending him and not Okongwu, which actually worked fairly well at times. Look, it wasn't like a brand new thing that people have never tried before. You put a wing on Wemby. Wemby plays like more of a perimeter guy sometimes. Okongwu was the kind of backline defender. It didn't always work perfectly, but it worked fine in this game. Also, Hunter and Okongwu went to the headband look tonight. Jamila Johnson asked about that post-game, and Okongwu, because he played so well, I think, was like, yeah, I'm probably going to do this again. So there's that. The Hawks shot it well early in this game. They were actually 4 of 6 from 3 to begin it, and then they went ice cold after that for a long time, and then in the second half they got hot again. It is what it is. But defensively, they allowed 22 points in like 5.5 minutes, which I said earlier, it was a slow start defensively. But they were in the game. They were still down by 10. They were down by 18, actually down by 20 points in the first half. Now, I mentioned on the show yesterday, the Hawks were going to actually need to win the non-Wembanyama minutes, and they promptly got smacked the first stint with Wemby off the court. And then actually the whole game, the Hawks were minus 13 with Wemby off the court and plus 12 when he was on the court. That's actually crazy. That's given where the splits are for the year, but it's one game. Things can happen. So this is my rotation thing of the night. In the first half, there are 24 minutes available at center in the first half. Okongwu played 12 and a half of them, and Nance played 11 and a half of them. Now, Okongwu was playing incredibly well. As we'll get into later on more, he was great in this game. Nance was not. And I said this right before about Capella, about Okongwu. Like, your backup center shouldn't be playing 11 and a half minutes in a row. Not even like, if you want to split it up more in a half, whatever, but like, they're going to get tired. These are bigs. They don't play that many minutes in a row, especially when you couldn't make the argument that Nance was like playing well. Like, usually if something like that happens, it's because a guy was like dominating and they wanted to like ride him hot hand, however you want to say that. That didn't happen in that first half. With Okongwu not in foul trouble at all, you shouldn't be playing Nance as much as Okongwu in a half. Just really ever. Unless Nance is just awesome, and he wasn't in that first half. That looks even weirder now because, for instance, Trae Young played 21 minutes in the first half and set a new season high in minutes for the game. So did Hunter. So two guys on your team set season highs in minutes in a regulation game, and your center, who was having his best game of his career in some respects, ends up with 12 minutes in the first half. Now, he played a lot in the second half, but it was just a weird situation, and they played a lot of just bad lineups in that first half. There was a lineup out there that was like no hope, basically, defensively. I didn't really get it, and I don't want to overstate it. Like, it's not. People like to say like Quin lost this game. I wouldn't go that far, but it was just it was vexing, I thought, in that first half. Also, they had a terrible end to the first half. They were down only 9, about 2 minutes to go before halftime. They gave up a 11-2 run in 2 minutes. Turnovers everywhere. Trae had a terrible close to the first half. Look, Trae, it was a tale of two halves for Trae. Trae was really not good in that first half. He was really quite bad. Second half, he was pretty much awesome, and it was weird. But the whole team just collapsed at the end of the first half. And suddenly you're down by 18 points. You missed 14 of your last 17 threes. It's crumbling on you. And Okongwu was great in that first half. So was Dyson, but nobody else was, basically. We're getting to the second half in a second. I have much more to get to, I promise, about the much more positive half of basketball, plus my player evaluations and much more. We'll get into that more in just 1 second. This show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Super Bowl 59 is here. It's on Sunday. 1 game, 2 teams, and endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every single play more exciting than with the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook, whether it's predicting who actually is going to score the first touchdown in the game, calling the winner of the MVP award, or even betting on the coin toss before the game actually even begins. They make it so easy to partake in all the action at FanDuel. They have all stuff you're looking for across sports betting space, from over-unders, point spreads, money lines, player props, and game props, same-game parlays, live betting, and so much more. And with live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff until the final whistle. The live betting feature also lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is really easy to navigate at FanDuel. Plus, if you know that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that is absolutely icing on the cake. Download the FanDuel app right now or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you get $200 in bonus bets. One more time, bet $5. If you win, $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel, and the place to go is FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner, Super Bowl 59. All right, into the second half. As I said before, the first half was not great, to be honest. They're down by 18 points, late collapse at the end of the first half. The third quarter, though, was absolutely lights out. They scored 43 points in the third. They scored 13 points in the first 2.5 minutes. They made their first 5 shots. They were down 17 still mid-quarter, but then they ran off a 19-6 run to get within 3 or 4 points. They scored 36 points on 70% shooting in about 9 minutes. They actually did win the 9 minutes in that first half in the third quarter. It helped that Trae Young just kind of woke up because he was really bad in the first half. But Okongwu, man, was really, really good. He had a new career high in scoring with 15 minutes left in the game. Now, unfortunately, he had 1 point the rest of the game. So it wasn't like he put up this massive number, but he had 29 points late in the third. Like, he was just great. And look, the Hawks the rest of the core was not like incredible, but they shot 69% from the field. They hit 5 threes. They had 11 assists. They had 3 guys in the third quarter score double figures in the same quarter. You don't often see 3 guys on the same team score 10-plus points in the same quarter, and they did that in the third. In the fourth, and this is kind of all related in some respects, they tightened the rotation. So they actually played only 6 guys the entire third quarter, which would almost never happen, especially in the third quarter, not a fourth quarter. Trae, Dyson, Hunter, and Okongwu all played the entire third quarter, which is not the usual thing. Then they actually kept Hunter in even longer to begin the fourth quarter with Trae on the bench. But then Trae came back in, played the rest of the game, and had season-high minutes. They also did use Veet and Dom Barlow early in the fourth. I thought Dom was really good, actually, for a while in the fourth quarter. Veet, not so good. I thought it was funny, though. Dom tried to dunk on Wemby, which did not go well. But people kind of either didn't know this or forgot it. Dom played with Wemby last year, so he was not afraid at all about Wemby. Like, maybe you should have some fear about Wemby in some respects, but that was pretty comfortable there. A couple big swings, like, for instance, the Hawks had a couple of questionable mid-range jump shots from Barlow and Veet mid-fourth that didn't go in. They got down by 7 again. They also closed with Veet over Ricochet, which I don't think it's just like crazy, but I didn't love it in this one, let's just say. It was back and forth, back and forth. They're down 7, though, with like 2:45 to go, the Hawks are. So obviously you're a big underdog at that point in time. Hunter hits back-to-back jump shots to get him within 2. Then they get a stop. It took them 3 tries to get a stop, though, because they gave up 2 offensive rebounds in a row, basically, about the 2-minute mark. They get a stop. Trae draws the foul. Very nearly, actually, a 3-point play for the lead. It didn't go in, but he makes both free throws to tie the game. After all that, with about 50 seconds to go, it's a tie game. But then Fox misses a layup on the offensive side of the floor for the Spurs. Wemby gets a tip dunk because he's an absolute alien. I will say Hunter was out of position to box him out because he went for a block that he was probably never going to get. So a small thing there, but not great. But Wemby's Wemby, and that's kind of unavoidable to some degree. The Hawks did get a little bit out of sorts on offense, and Quin calls timeout with 9 on the shot clock because they had to score there. Like, obviously, you're down by 2, you got to score in the final seconds. They call timeout. They get Trae going to his right. Trae was actually asked about this, I think it was by Kevin Chouinard post-game. So they wanted to get him to his right hand. He did that. He wanted a 3-point play. He didn't get the call, but Trae makes the floater to tie the game with 8 seconds remaining. So now, after all that, Spurs call timeout. They advance the ball. Wemby gets downhill, and Okongwu fouls him. Here's where it gets fun or not so fun if you're a Hawks fan. It's a play that's not always called a foul in real time. I thought in real time it was a clean block, just on the first thing I saw. But you hear the whistle. It's late in the game. Usually, not always, but usually, guys are allowed to play a little bit more at the end of the game. They don't like to call fouls to decide the game, especially in a tie game. So, but because it was Wemby, he's 7'5", all those things, the foul's called. Quin, and you can see from where I'm sitting in the arena, you can see Quin's entire thing. Quin is looking behind him, presumably towards his assistants. It's usually Brittany Donaldson, who's kind of the challenge expert. There was a consultation. It wasn't like Quin just like immediately decided I'm challenging this without looking at it or without at least considering it. He did turn around, they talked for a while, and then he challenges it. Now, if the Hawks had 2 timeouts remaining, it would have been a play that you definitely challenge because you would have 1 more left. And now there's 2 seconds to go. Why does that matter? Well, in the NBA, if you call timeout, you can advance the ball to half court. And in a situation with 2 seconds left in the game, that's a huge factor, especially when you're called for a foul. You have to assume they're going to make at least 1. But if you don't have a timeout, you're kind of, if they make even 1 of the 2, you're probably going to lose. Like, and when I say probably, I mean you're almost certainly going to lose. Not definitely, but almost certainly. So Quin chooses to challenge it. And I do understand why. It felt like it was a close play. But after I saw the replay, I was like, oh, they're not going to win this challenge. Like, it was just that simple. So the unfortunate part is that it was called in real time. Once it's called in real time, you're kind of up the creek without a paddle, as I say. But Quin looks to challenge it. I did ask him about it post-game. He did not seem I think he's probably feeling like he let his team down some. It's a coach. He's trying to win the game. I wasn't trying to attack. It was just it had to be asked after the game. I thought it was a mistake. Even in real time, I said that on social media. I thought it was a mistake because it was the last timeout. And if you lose the challenge, you have no timeouts. And what happened is the threat of happening. So when he goes to the line, a good free throw shooter, if he makes the first one, you're dead, basically. Because if he makes the first one, they can miss the second one on purpose, and you can't do anything about it. Because all you can do there without a timeout is get a 60-foot heave, like the Hawks did. Actually, Trae got a better shot than you might have expected him to get at that point from 55 feet away. He misses it as he's supposed to miss it. If Wemby misses the first one, you could say, all right, he has to make the second one now. You could throw a baseball pass, try to Christian Laettner it up, and score. That's doable. But if you had a timeout there, let's just say the Hawks don't challenge. Fast forward. Hawks don't challenge the play. Wemby goes to the line. Even if he makes both free throws, which he probably would have, I think. You call timeout, advance the ball to half court. Now you're down 2. Yes, there's 2 seconds to go, but you have a chance to get 1 pass in and a look at the rim from Trae or from Hunter or whatever to either tie the game or win the game. That's a much better chance than not. So Quin said that too. Like, obviously, in retrospect, I think Trae said the same thing. Like, if you know you're going to lose it, you don't challenge. Clearly, that's true. But it was controversial. It's one of those things that's like very nuanced too, because if you don't know the NBA rules a lot, you wouldn't know that's like really bad to do that because of the timeout advancement stuff. But anyway, that burned them. They lose the game. And obviously Quin will be thinking about that one for a while. To the players real quickly before we get out of here. I sort of gave it away earlier, but this is the short version. The bench was not very good. Veet was, not terrible, but 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 5 points. Keaton Wallace gave him pretty decent minutes in 12 minutes, 5 points in at 12 minutes. Didn't do too much, but it was fine defensively. Garrison Matthews was terrible in his 7 minutes. The Hawks skipped him in the second half. That was the right decision. He did not earn more playing time in the first half. I have often defended Garrison. I think Garrison is a useful NBA player. He was not good tonight. And that's both those things can be true at the same time. He was not good. Don Barlow, a little bit overzealous sometimes, I thought, in this one, but still 5 points, 3 blocks in 11 minutes. I thought Dom at least held his own. He took one kind of bad shot in the fourth, but everything else was fine. Larry Nance, 17 minutes, 1 point, minus 13, game worst. He was not good, and it made it look worse because Okongwu was so good in this game. Anyway, to the starters, Reece Shea, 23 minutes, 6 points. He was fine. He didn't do much of anything, honestly. I think defensively he was okay. 0-3 from 3, 1 rebound, 3 fouls. He was just kind of a neutral. I would have at least considered playing him more down the stretch, but he was clearly the 5th guy, not anything above the 5th guy in this game. Hunter, 22 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. Productive game for him. He hit 6 threes. Didn't do a ton else. The rebounding was actually pretty encouraging there from Hunter. +4. Made a bunch of shots. Again, season high minutes for him. 39 minutes is a lot of time for him to be on the floor, but that happened. Dyson Daniels, 38 minutes, 19 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals. Man, he's been awesome. Dyson has been playing so well. That happened again tonight. Huge factor. He did a good job on Fox, I thought, in this game, just being a very, very clearly plus player. He's really good in a lot of different ways. Let's just say, let's do Okongwu. Okongwu was awesome in this game. It was a career high for him, 30 points, 12 rebounds as well, 5 assists. I thought the first half, his passing really popped, honestly. It was impressive from him. It's weird because in the previous 5 games, Onyeka was averaging 10.4 points per game, and he hadn't scored more than 14 points in 2 weeks. And then he has 29 points in 3 quarters. So it was kind of a weird outlier in some respects, but he had it going the entire game. He took 5 threes. He made 3 of them, a couple of above the break threes in this game. He was 10 of 11 on 2s. His touch was always awesome around the rim, but it was really good here. Defensively, it wasn't his best night probably, but he was fine there for sure. He wasn't the problem. And man, the passing and the scoring, he was just really, really good. And I wish it had been a win for him to get more recognition, but he was really good in this game. And then Trae Young, 32 points, 12 assists, did have 9 turnovers. That's too many, even for a guy who has a lot of usage like Trae does. He was 7 of 10 on 2s, 3 of 11 from 3. I said it before, I think, earlier in the show, but it was clearly a tale of 2 halves. He was bad, capital B bad, in the first half, by his standards. Capital B bad. Second half, he was pretty much awesome. I think he had 19 and 7 after halftime, something like that. He was really, really, really good after the half, but the first half matters too. So it was not his best night. I think if you average it all together, it was a totally fine Trae game, a C+, B- Trae game, even though, it's kind of funny to say that when he has 32 and 12, but he'll have better nights for sure. But yeah, it was stark how much worse he was in the first half and the second half, but there you go. All right. That's all I have on the game. That's all I have on the deadline stuff for now. As a PSA, unless something breaks in the next 3 hours while I am probably supposed to be sleeping, the next show will have to be Thursday night, no matter what happens on Thursday morning, because I have a day job. That's the reality. I will have a show no matter what happens on Thursday night. The deadline, as a reminder, is at 3 p.m. Eastern. Occasionally, a deal will pop up a little bit after that because it is agreed to and leaks out. But the trade call has to be started, or at least you're on hold by 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern. So we normally have all the details by 4 or 5 p.m. I'll have a show sometime in the evening. I don't know exactly when, but I have to get home and prep and be able to record and all that stuff. So just stay tuned. I promise you there will be a show, win, lose, or draw. If the Hawks do nothing, I'll have plenty to talk about them doing nothing, honestly. If they make trades, I'll have explanations and explainers and my evaluation of the deals, etc., whether they're good, whether they're bad, all that stuff. And we'll get to the fallout as we always do. By the way, the Hawks also play again on Friday against the Bucks, which we'll probably preview a little bit on tomorrow's show, but stay tuned for that. The big news, of course, though, is Thursday is the deadline. There's deals happening probably all day long. all the way into the afternoon. So you want to lock it in right now. Please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you find your podcasts. We're on Apple and Spotify. We are on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. Please like the video there. Plus, follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. I'm there at BT Rowland. You can also find me on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And you can also follow my non-podcast work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody, get some sleep, hopefully. Maybe I will at some point. And then buckle up for Thursday, and we'll have a show later on Thursday evening. We'll see you all next time.